It's the Week 13 Fantasy Podcast, DFS edition, Occupy Family in the building. I'm Walid. I'm here with Brian, and we won't be talking about the Turkey Day games here.
No, we will not be because by the time you listen to this, it might be too late. And we have you covered anyway. So if you're interested in Thanksgiving content and you're listening to this before the Thursday games start, check out our YouTube channel at Occupy Fantasy and OccupyFantasy.com. We have a very detailed DFS plug for each of the three games. So if you need content there, that's what you need to check out.
So let's fast forward to Sunday in the main slate. Start at the betting odds level. So the largest favorites on the slate, we have the Panthers 10 points against the Skins, the Eagles 9-point favorites at Miami, and the Chiefs will host the Raiders and have a 10-point spread their way.
Yeah, I think what is going to be interesting this week is we know McCaffrey is still crazy expensive, 10,500 or whatever it may be. But now they're in a really good spot, 10-point home favorites against the Skins. In the past, the last couple of weeks, his ownership hasn't gotten above 20% or so, and we've said you don't need to get him into your low risk lineup. So what do you think about this week with a relatively high team total? And I think the tune may change for most people.
Yeah, I mean, it is, first of all, he's only had one bad game this year, and everything else has been like world beating, right?
Yep.
um, and for him to hit value, like let's say get three times, he just needs to replicate a similar performance the last week, which is just run of the mill for him. Catch 8, 9 balls for 70 yards and find the end zone multiple times, which seems pretty likely against the Skins.
Right, exactly. And our Occupy model is up and running. Still waiting on a few more pieces of information to go into it as of Wednesday afternoon. But McCaffrey is the number 2 running back on the main slate as far as DraftKings goes. Number 1 on FanDuel, which is a slight difference from the past couple of weeks. He was 3rd or 4th the last 2 weeks because of his salary and how some other players rate out. So him bumping up to number 2 at that tremendous salary is another indication to me that he'll probably be higher owned and someone we need to get into our lineups.
Right. And, the Occupy model accounts for pricing, right? So when you see someone's ranked third and compared to someone ranked first, it's counting how much, value per dollar. And it's just insane to see McCaffrey at 11,000, $3,400 more than our second highest running back, Leonard Fournette, who delivered a wonderful performance last week.
Right, yeah. Fournette, I imagine he'll be popular too.
Despite the tougher matchup.
Right, exactly. But he finally hit some positive touchdown regression. So I expect we'll see him pretty popular, especially because that game, as we look at the highest total games of the week, Kansas City and Oakland checks in at number 1, 51.5. But this is like last week where we just had one game above 50 points because the game that Fournette plays in, Jacksonville and Tampa, is second at just 49 points. We also have the Rams in Arizona, 47.5. San Francisco and Baltimore at 47. So with Fournette being in the second highest projected game, I imagine that will drive up his ownership some too.
Yeah, I think so. Running through these games with high totals, obviously the Chiefs and the Raiders is tilted towards Kansas City. And we talked about how messy this backfield situation is, along with just the Chiefs being banged up. Is there anyone you trust on Kansas City?
I think we need to see how Tyreek Hill is. And from all
Yeah.
indications, he doesn't seem to be that big of an injury. He was, making his case to get back into the game in the Mexico City matchup with the Chargers. They held him out as a precaution. He had the full bye week to recover. So it'll be interesting to see. I think he's probably going to be okay. And if so, he's actually on our underperforming receivers list, which is scary to think about for someone of that caliber. And I think he rates as the number 1 receiver in our model this week. So he should be someone you definitely get into your lineups, assuming he's cleared by Friday.
So Chris Godwin last week had a game, and this week they take on the Jaguars in the second highest implied total with 49 points. It's funny, like a year ago, you would think Tampa Bay is a team you'd want to run against, and Jacksonville is a team you probably don't want to pass against. But
Right.
both teams are kind of going against what we've already concluded as biases.
Yeah, exactly. Jacksonville, especially without Jalen Ramsey, much easier to pass on this year. And Jacksonville's passing attack, just in general, on offense, has been a lot better with DJ Chark and Westbrook and Conley in featured roles. So
Mm,
this is a game that features a couple of guys on the underperforming receiver list. We talk about it every week, and we'll have that section at the end. But there are so many guys on the list this week that it's the conversation is intertwined between high totals and these underperforming receivers. Mike Evans, as you know, just tons of high value targets, and
mhm.
he's on the list. Chris Conley is actually on the list as well. A lot of people will look to DJ Chark, but Conley has been underperforming but getting volume.
Yeah.
So those two guys in this game makes a ton of sense. Last week, you and I talked about Tennessee Jacksonville as being sneaky. We talked about it in a
Hmm.
couple of our streams. They featured two guys on this underperforming receiver list. I think it's a good way to look at stacks in general. If you can find quarterbacks that the model ranks highly, maybe it's a high total game, maybe it's not, but you have receivers that have been underperforming and expected to blow up. I think that's a good way to look at pairing up some guys in a stack.
Totally. It's a good foundation to kind of lay out. The Rams and Jared Goff have continued to struggle, and it's an abysmal showing for that offense last week. Sometimes the doctor orders a matchup against the Cardinals to get things right. Is that the case here, or are you just concerned about Jared Goff and his impact on Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, the OL injuries too have been pretty tough, but the model loves golf this week. Um, they have a pretty high team total, still 25 points. The betting markets aren't flinching. They're not suggesting any major downfall for the Rams this week in a pretty good matchup. They're the eighth highest team total of the entire week. My question to you is: we love playing tight ends against the Cardinals. If Gerald Everett is healthy, if he's not, it's Tyler Higbee. Do
Mhm.
we continue the trend and keep playing those guys?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, I think it was the New York Giants last year, or was it 2 years ago
Yep,
maybe,
yep.
where the funnel for tight ends was just too unreal that it almost didn't matter who the matchup was, because that's where teams are going to attack them. And Gerald Everett is a guy who brings high upside to the table. So if he is indeed good to go, we've seen him featured some games, and
Yep.
that's what we look for in high risk contests at the position, is someone who can get a lot of targets but can also stretch the field, right? Not just dink and dunk like maybe like a Jack Doyle
Right.
was earlier in the season. So yeah, I don't see why not. It's not like either whoever is healthy, it's going to cost you a lot.
Right. Well, Everett, just to make sure everyone's clear, it is Wednesday again. We don't know for sure his
Mhm.
status yet, but hyperextended his knee. He's day to day. We'll see if
Yeah,
they run him out for this game. If he doesn't, Tyler Higbee will play pretty much every snap. He's
yeah,
2,500 on DraftKings, 5,500 on
that's a no
FanDuel.
brainer. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there you
at
go.
that point. Yeah, definitely monitor that injury. And Everett is like he was dealing with a wrist injury the other week,
Yeah.
and got a feel for the guy. He might take a week off, and if he does, Higby gets a massive boost. Preview of the Super Bowl. That's what everyone's saying. Niners and Ravens. They have a 47-point total, and it's one of these games where you can see it have a lot of like offensive, let's say production, but maybe a little harder to kind of zero in on who the receivers are, at least on the Baltimore side.
And maybe on the San Francisco side too. I do like this
Hmm.
game as a stack. 47
Hmm.
point total. I don't see San Francisco slowing down Baltimore. In
Yeah,
fact, if you look at the EPA charts that I retweet, this time every year,
yeah,
that try to predict the Super Bowl champions, really the only two that qualify as of week 12 are the 49ers and the Ravens. The 49ers are getting their offense is a little above average, but their defense obviously has carried them. And the Ravens' offense has been masterful through 12 weeks, and their defense is getting
unreal.
better every single week. So this will be a true test for San Francisco's defense. I don't see them slowing them down. Lamar Jackson, certainly high ceiling. Again, who do you pair him with? Marquise
Hmm.
Brown has been scoring a touchdown like every three touches, so he's due for some regression. I think Lamar Jackson's due for some passing regression too. I mean, he threw 5 touchdowns on 20 attempts the other night, so
Yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of tough here. Any feelings either way, or San Francisco side guys you like?
I don't necessarily know who I like. I just know that I think that this game will have some sneaky stack value. Um, it's definitely like on paper for some folks, given the fact that there are 3 games with higher implied totals, and then how hard it is to kind of isolate guys on top of honestly the fact that both teams do have good defenses will turn some folks off. I don't think this is a game you need to like super stack, but you can mix it up. You could have like Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and Emmanuel Sanders. You can,
Right.
yeah, I still prefer Lamar significantly to Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't care what the price says. I think Jimmy is more likely to have a dud than Lamar. But the receivers, the tight ends, like Kittle's, obviously a um, easy play at the position given what he's done, injury aside, with the broken bone in his ankle. It's ridiculous. But it's one of those games where I can see stacking a quarterback receiver combo or quarterback tight end and then running it back, but not getting too deep and just trying to pick the guys that blow up.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and as we talked about in the Monday plug, Lamar Jackson is just something we've never seen before from a
Mm.
fantasy perspective, especially in the DFS age. So, like as
I think you didn't you curse in the plug.
I did curse in the plug. He's a fucking cheat code. Like it had to be explicitly stated
Yeah.
how different he is from a fantasy perspective, and stacking around him is also different. You can't adhere to normal rules. If you listen to our
Right.
Tuesday streams, our $1 million mission, where I'm all about getting 5 guys from the same game into my super
Yeah.
high risk lineups, I don't think you have to do that with Lamar Jackson. And I think it's actually an opportunity for a rare 2x2 stack where you get Lamar and a pass catcher. And because Lamar
Mm.
offers so much upside, he's basically 2 players in one. You can
Right.
still run
Right.
it back with 2 players from San Francisco and have
Mm.
ultimate upside. Like you don't need to just do 2x1. I think it's very possible if Lamar and his pass catcher hits his ceiling, then likely 2 guys from the other side on San Francisco may hit their ceilings as well.
So I'll put you on the spot quick. It's only Wednesday, so I won't hold you to it, and you're more than welcome to change your mind Sunday Periscope time. But give me the pass catcher, and accounting for how much they're worth, right, against your salary. One pass catcher from each team.
I think this will be nuts. I always harass people for using 2 tight ends, but you could
Mhm.
very easily go Mark Andrews, George Kittle
Wow.
in the same lineup here on either site, just because of their high upside. If I had to choose an actual receiver, it would be San Francisco. I really do think Mark Andrews is the guy from Baltimore side, though.
Interesting. Yeah, Lamar. Maybe like a Lamar, Mark Andrews, and either Debo or Sanders. If you
Yeah.
want 2 tight ends, and that's a way to differentiate for sure. What about other sneaky stacks on your radar?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Carolina and Washington needs to be in the mix. The total for this game is just, wow, 39.5 points. But as we saw with Tennessee and Jacksonville last week, low total games sometimes go over the total by a decent amount.
Yeah.
It's a median number. It's not necessarily an average number. So this game could very easily score 50 some points. And the reason I say this is because we have McCaffrey, who should be a key part of these stacks. But then we also have 3 pass catchers who are due for big games. Curtis Samuel rejoins the list after taking a week off. He's been on the list seemingly every single week. We have Terry McLaurin, who last week just had an insane amount of opportunity, as did Kelvin Harmon, who has been taking on a greater role in the last week or two with Paul Richardson out, Trey Quinn being rotated in and out. So those 3
Yeah.
guys are super interesting to me, and I don't think they'll be highly owned at all.
No, not Harmon at all. And I think the Skins have definitely given him more opportunity and kind of turned the page on Trey Quinn, maybe. But yeah, I think Curtis Samuel is always worth a consideration in a high risk contest, just given his upside per dollar. And the Skins are known to be burnt toast on the secondary. So yeah, McCaffrey, Samuel, Scary Terry, Kevin Harmon. That's probably it though. I think you could always go DJ Moore, but I like you can get creative with the stack. Maybe Greg Olson even.
Oh yeah, definitely Greg Olson. I'm gonna look in the model really quickly to see where these guys rank. Kyle Allen, not to give away too much, but he's a top 5 play in the model. And
Mm,
if you're really trying to get nuts, Dwayne Haskins will not be owned at all,
yeah,
and he's
and
basically
he's
minimum price 4,600 on DraftKings.
Yeah, that's always worth the eye in high risk contests. What about the Giants and Packers?
That's another interesting game. Daniel Jones, we talked about him as a streaming option because of Green Bay's poorest pass defense as of late. Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams stack on the other side. Aaron Jones, Matt LaFleur said they need to get him more involved, which I'm
Hmm.
sure his fantasy owners are happy about. So lots of options in this game. Sterling Shepard back. Evan Ingram, we'll see if he returns. Golden Tate. Darius
Yeah.
Slayton, like literally tons of different ways you can go in this game, and I don't mind that over some of these other higher total games.
No, I think it's one of my favorites this week. Now, we talked about this earlier in the season where if Eli Manning loses his job to Daniel Jones, how would that affect Saquon Barkley's targets? And some weeks it seems like it has, other weeks it hasn't. The last two, I mean, he had 2 receptions for 1 yard last week. The week before, 5 receptions for 30 yards. But is it me or just like maybe am I holding? I guess him being hurt for a few weeks against him. But does it just seem like Barkley is not as effective as and maybe it's because of Christian McCaffrey making everything look too easy in the receiving game. But do you feel like it almost feels like Leonard Fournette is a more effective pass catcher right now for fantasy purposes?
He is, and I think I've mentioned it before. We talked about Royce Freeman last year. We've talked about many running backs. High ankle sprains are just death sentences for running backs. It just kills their efficiency. It's a really tough injury to play on, and he came back really quickly.
Hmm.
So it's clearly affecting him, and I don't know if he'll be the same player again this year without getting some more time off to rest and recover as he's playing on it every single week. So yeah, it's tough to fit in Barkley. I keep putting him in my high risk player pools every week, and he comes
Hmm.
back with 6 points. It's getting tough to play him. So maybe as a
Yeah.
part of a game stack, but I wouldn't prioritize him in any way.
Right. I mean, and then it's like last 2 games, 7 points, 5.5 points.
And like, come on.
He's gonna blow up this week. He's gonna have 30 points. So like I'm gonna roster him for sure, and he's fairly cheap on both sites. But yeah, you can get creative with that game, for sure. So let's look at underperforming receivers for week 13, and we have a bunch of names on this list.
Yeah, so just to reiterate what we talk about every week, this list are guys that have in the last 3 weeks seen a ton of opportunity. High percentage of their team's intended air yards, high percentage of their team's targets, but because of whatever reason, it hasn't translated in the box scores. So if you look at their game logs, haven't been that impressive. But the underlying volume indicates that they're due for some big games, and this trend of the last couple of weeks, it's been paying off pretty big time, Walid. I mean, some of the guys we've talked about
Yo,
seemingly every week. So one or two guys from this list are in the
oh
winning million
yeah,
dollar lineup. So
I was just gonna say that. I'm like literally one or two guys that we're gonna name right now are going to be like slate breakers.
right, like literally scored multiple touchdowns, 100 yards. So here are the guys this week. I mean, it's a massive list, and a who's who of receivers are on this list. So I'm personally thinking of not stacking as much just so I can get as many of these guys into my lineup as I
Mm.
can. So here they are. We have Cortland Sutton against the Chargers. We know Sutton's been getting a ton of usage, even with Brandon Allen. He was shut down last week by Tre'Davious White. Big reason why his numbers weren't there. Chris Conley, we mentioned earlier, against Tampa Bay. Scary Terry against the Panthers. Mike Williams, like Curtis Samuel, makes his return to the underperforming receivers list. Mike Evans against Jacksonville. Love Mike Evans being on this list. If you're playing the Sunday night showdown slate, Julian Edelman is on the list. Odell makes another return to the list against Pittsburgh. Tyreek against Oakland. Monday night, we have DK Metcalf in the showdown slate. Then we have a rare tight end. The last time a tight end was on this list, Waleed, was Noah Fant. And if I
Mm.
remember correctly, he
Hmm.
did pretty well. And that tight
Yeah.
end this week is Vance McDonald. So,
Weren't people on Reddit grilling you like, how did you know this?
yeah, I was like, dude, just listen to our podcast. They try to say it's luck, and yeah, it's fortunate. But the way I explained it is, yeah, it was quote unquote lucky that Noah Fant had a big game, but it was really unlucky that he had 3 poor games in a row based on his opportunity.
There you go.
So there you go. And guys who just missed the list, by the way, Kelvin Harmon, Will Fuller, who even though he had a massive game in his return last week, still left some yards on the field. Devontae Parker and Robert Woods. So lots of guys to consider this week.
Oh yeah, love Robert Woods. But no, to your point, also I think Curtis Samuel, you mentioned him earlier on the list. I think you may have just breezed past him here. Um, Vance McDonald, like he's in a juicy spot, man. Given just like the injuries, and now you're in a situation where something's got to give, man.
Yeah, exactly. Now they have Devlin Hodges under center. They benched Mason Rudolph. And if we just look at the last 3 weeks, we can even look at the last 4 weeks because he was close
Mm-hmm.
to making the list a couple times now. But the last 3 weeks, Vance McDonald, 118 air yards on 15 targets, which is pretty rare. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, tight ends really don't get into that 100 air yard range
No,
over a 3 week span. It really just doesn't happen.
yeah,
And he's only caught 7 of his 15 targets for 45 yards. Hasn't gotten into the end zone yet. So,
right.
big fan of McDonald bouncing back this week, especially if Juju misses one more game.
Yeah, and before this past week, he had three straight games with 7 targets,
Yep.
and that's hard to come across. So I think he had 1 target last week. I think that will come back and regress. But no, that list. I mean, Sutton and Mike Will maybe a little like reverse stack there.
Yep. I mean, there's a bunch of guys on this list that play each other, so you get
Hmm.
added correlation. I mean, you get underperforming receiver explosion combined with same game correlation. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a great way to finish or start any high risk lineup. So Mike Williams, we saw in Mexico City, tons of deep balls downfield, eventually caught one, and then Sutton, who's going to continue to get tons of opportunity in a much better cornerback matchup this week. So a lot of these guys in good spots. I'm excited to play them.
Yeah, and it'll kind of circle back as far as the way this slate's shaping up, where get McCaffrey in there, maybe find a little reverse correlation with some of these receivers, and if you throw it, like you don't necessarily have to go super stack with your quarterback and 2 receivers. But I was looking at the model, and Lamar Jackson was ranked pretty low, mainly because of the matchup and also his absurd price. Like what do you think of just like a foundation though of like Lamar Miller, McCaffrey, and then maybe like a Curtis Samuel and like a Scary Terry or a Mike Will and Cortland Sutton? Is that something you could see yourself building around, or is that like too all over the place?
I don't think so. I mean, especially if you're playing, as we recommend, 100-player leagues, right? Like that can
Yeah.
easily take down a 100-player league and
Hmm.
25 times your return. So, and just to, we've been trying to look at the back end of the model. It can't figure out Lamar Jackson, just to be 100% honest. Like,
Yeah.
he's breaking the model by himself. Also, the model does think he's due for passing regression. He leads the league in
Right.
passing touchdown percentage. So the model is banking on that some as well. But again,
Yeah.
it cannot figure out for the life of itself his rushing ability. So you'll
Totally.
see him ranked a little bit lower than he should be most weeks, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Don't tilt and like avoid playing him. He's obviously a slate breaker and has the upside to help you win some big contests.
Yeah,
Uh, any
as we saw Monday night.
Yeah, seriously. Any closing thoughts before we head into the weekend?
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on injuries. I don't think as of Wednesday we have any super cheap running backs that should pop up. Miles Sanders once again sounds like he'll be.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this just before we get out of here. Miles Sanders played a ton of snaps, getting most of the rushing attempts and targets from the running backs in Philadelphia, but just zero fantasy production. Does he get it turned around this week against Miami?
He has to, right? 10.5 point favorites. He has to. And at his price, like you kind of got to take your chances there. 27.5 point team total. They have no receivers. It's not like I guess they could rely on defense and special teams, but I think he's due for like 100 total yards and a touch. It just seems very obtainable.
I agree. We'll see how projected ownership looks when it comes out, but I
And I'm
feel
sure he'll still be fairly popular. Like
no matter what, yeah. And again,
there's
for the third week in a row, he'll be in a ton of my lineups. We'll see if
yeah.
it can change this week. So
I mean, yeah, when you're the lead back of a team going against the Dolphins and there's like 20 other running backs priced higher than you, and you have McCaffrey on the slate, then it's just easy to justify that.
it's very, very true.
Awesome. All right. So that does it for us. You know where to find us at Occupy Fantasy. Brian, let them know what's going on Thanksgiving weekend.
Yep. OccupyFantasy.com, the NFL Thanksgiving edition of the Daily Plug is up. Thursday edition goes through every game. YouTube, individual videos for each of the 3 showdown slates on FanDuel and DraftKings for Thanksgiving. The main slate Daily Plug will be out by Friday evening, occupyfantasy.com. Saturday, we have our live Twitch stream, Saturday afternoon, twitch.tv/occupyfantasy, where we take your questions and preview the slate. And then Sunday morning, I believe Chris will be on at 11 a.m. Eastern, our NFL Daily Plug writer, answering your questions on our Twitter feed. So lots of ways, lots of content this week. Really excited.
Awesome. All right, guys, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you on the flip side.